Now to kick off this year's theme, Art versus Craft, here is our opening MC, Michael Ruhlman. Michael Ruhlman is a prolific writer, a cook with a keen sense of craft and a keen sense of humor to match. His 1997 book, The Making of a Chef, put him on the culinary map. And he followed with a series of award-winning cookbooks, including several he partnered with acclaimed chefs and ICT past presenters, Eric Ripert, Grant Achatz, Brian Polson, and several books with Thomas Keller. This is Michael's second time as a participant of the Congress, but it's his first time as MC, and we are thrilled to have him. Please put your hands together to welcome Michael Ruhlman.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. We're all very lucky to be working in this industry at this time in our history. There is a great new theory of human evolution that was just published last spring by Richard Wrangham, a Harvard anthropologist, who argues that it wasn't genetic fluke that made us human, it wasn't the taming of fire that made us human, but it was in fact our starting to cook food that made us human. It allowed us to consume enormous amounts of calories that used to take hours and hours and huge volumes of raw food. Once we started cooking food, our brains got bigger, our guts got smaller. It did something really important. It changed society. Once we started cooking food and we took all these great genetic advantages from this cooked food, we had to work in groups. We had to form domestic arrangements. We had to share labor. It created our society. So when people say it's just food or why are you so crazy about this food, understand that it is fundamental to our humanity. And so it is an honor to be here among cooks and food professionals. It is a great honor to be with the chefs I'm about to introduce. I started working with Thomas Keller on his cookbook in about 1997. And at the time, I thought anybody who called themselves an artist, any chef who called themselves an artist was full of shit. I really did. I thought, you're full of it. You're serving people. Your job is to make people happy. Food has transformed in such an enormous way that I think the question of art versus craft is now a great one, and it's time for it. So to help me discuss this and illuminate it and educate me about it, three great chefs. Please, chefs, will you come out? Thomas Keller, David Kinch, Manresa, Dan Barber, Blue Hill. They need no introduction. They are the leaders in the industry. They've been in it for a long time. They're very opinionated, and I'm Thomas, Dan, David. He's the chef.
I didn't hear
wherever you want.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. That's the best you can do? Jeez.
Food has transformed in so many ways. It's political now. We're changing the dining experience. If you go to Alinea in Chicago, it's almost like performance art eating at Alinea. Dan Barber is trying to manipulate nature. I wonder if that is its own form of art. So I guess what I have to ask you is, first of all, David, chef, craftsman, or artist? Where do you stand on the subject?
Well, I think it all depends on the chef. I think in very rare occasions, it can be both. It can be both. I think people are attracted to the craftsman aspect to it, the details and the techniques and working and the repeating of steps over and over and over again is certainly a craft and developing the rote skills to do it. But I think in special occasions in restaurants, instead of just feeding people and trying to make them happy, making them content, I think sometimes it goes to another level, a level of wonder and delight and a personal beauty. People see beauty in what happens. And I think that's when it starts to go into an artistic sense. But I think it almost always is a craft in terms of working with your hands.
Thomas.
Michael.
Craft, you've always said chef is a craftsman. You're very humble about it. You are a consummate craftsman. Is a chef can a chef be an artist, and if so, what way? And does it matter?
It's an interesting, what does a chef do? A chef cooks, and to me, cooking is a craft. It's something that you do over and over and over and over and over and over again. Repetition is one of the reasons that I believe I'm a really good cook, is because I enjoy repetition. I enjoy repetition and rituals. I've talked about that before. So you think about other crafts. You think about a woodworker, you know, who's making a beautiful piece of furniture. I mean, when he's done, it could appear to be art. I mean, a beautiful table, beautiful chair. But is he an artist or is he a craftsman? He's working the wood over and over.
I would say
somebody who does Venetian plaster. I mean, you touch that when it's done and it's silky and you go, wow, this is amazing. I mean, visually, texturally. But is a Venetian plasterer a craftsman or is he an artist? Because when he's done, I mean, it could be a beautiful wall. A tile setter, the same thing. So I think in the beginning you have to respect the craft of cooking. You really have to learn the fundamentals of what that is, and part of that is in repetition. Now, building up to that point, I think, you know, we talked about this, is at one point, could it be perceived as art? And I truly believe that gets maybe to the point where you start to present the food. You know, it becomes very aesthetically pleasing. We start to put it on beautiful design pieces of porcelain or silver or wood or, you know, whatever that form of delivery is to the guest. It's taken out to the dining room and paraded out there and placed in front of them, and there's oohs and ahs because of the beauty of it. And we certainly want to, as chefs and as cooks, we certainly want to entice our guests to want to eat the food and look at the food and be really happy, and it's a pleasurable experience looking at it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good it looks. If it doesn't taste really, really good, it's going to be a huge disappointment. So when you get back to it, what is it? It's about the flavor of food, and the flavor of food comes through the craftsmanship of cooking.
What's the goal of a chef? What's a chef's job?
Maybe the conception we have of art versus craft is kind of the wrong question. Why is art here and craft over here? You know, why do we look at the madman genius of, say, a Ferran Adria and put him here, and then look at a faithful traditionalist, say a sushi chef, and put them here? I think we'd all at some point agree that that's just a little too simple, and that maybe, you know, the role of the chef or the role of a true artist is to find that compromise. And in fact, you know, probably the best artists, I don't know how you can rank artists, but let's say the most enduring artists, the ones who stand the test of time, like the two chefs that are to the right of me. These are artists who are most talented at restraint. You know, when we think of restraint, we think of craftsmen, but I think of artists, the best artists, again, the most enduring artists, the ones who take things away. So, not to the point of minimalism, but to the point of furthering the plate of food, or the scene in a movie, or the written word.
I don't like being told how to eat,
But
or
we're getting
how
a lot.
I'm supposed to eat something, or the emotions I'm supposed to feel. You know, I think a lot of it is, you know, it's a personal experience. You know, a plate of food comes out, or a menu, a series of plates come out over a course of time. And, you know, if it's a good meal, it tells a story. You know, it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. And you should be able to relate to that story, but in a very personal sense. And that's not with all restaurants. A lot of restaurants, you go and you have a good time and you leave and you don't remember what you had. You had a good meal. It's all about value and what you pay for it. But I think really ambitious restaurants, it's more about a personal story. If you go in and say, that's tarragon, eat that after you eat this, or something like that. To me, it destroys the whole spontaneity, which is very important. There's something that you brought up, is the spontaneity of cooking. That's part of the true joy of cooking.
really. At the end of the day, I mean, you know, whether you're in fine dining or casual dining, family dining, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we're nurturing our guests. They're coming in to experience the food, to be nurtured when they leave. And I think that's something that we really have to respect. And it's all certainly a matter of perception as well. And Dan brings out the point. Why are we here comparing the two? You know, versus craft versus art. You know, because at the end of the day, it's the perception of the guest eating. You know, wow, that some guests come back and say that was so beautiful. I felt like I was eating art. That's not my point of view. My point of view is to nurture you and give you a great experience through the food, through the service, through the environment that we've established for you.
At the same time, you've gone to extraordinary lengths to make it visually beautiful. You've created products, silver and porcelain products, to present your food on.
Exactly, and I think that, as I said, when we get to the end of the line, after we've established our craft and become very good at it, we're thinking about what's the next step. We want to aesthetically present our food in a way that's very pleasing and enticing for our guests, and that's where people start to say that looks like art. But for me, it's not art. For me, it's food.
Many chefs out there trying to create an experience and almost enforcing an emotion on you and a way of eating. Where do you stand on that?
Oh, when you say forcing, like,
well,
you know,
okay,
here, eat this
let's look
way,
at
taste that.
Your colleague, Grant, who is one of the most talented craftsmen, but he's really pushing the boundaries as far as what food is, how we eat it, how we think about it, doing a lot of things that are traditionally in the artist's camp. But when you go to Alinea, you were instructed exactly how to eat.
I don't know if it's art or if it's intellectual cuisine, where they're asking you to think about it. And I think that's the difference. When you think about progressive cuisine today, it's very intellectual. You know, you take a strawberry, you dip it in the powder, you chew on it for 10 seconds, you put it down, you take a sip of liquid, you hold it in your mouth for 8.3 seconds, and you swallow it. And so what is that?
Yeah, that's a great
distinction.
distinction.
I mean, the thing that you're realizing is if you like it or not was it good or bad. You have no idea if it was good or bad because you've never had it before. There's no reference points to it. So your only thing that you can analyze is do I like that experience or don't I like that experience? So you're thinking about it. The other cuisine is emotional cuisine. You know, you've had food like that before several times. Something as innocuous as mashed potatoes. You all know when you have an amazing mashed potato because you've had bad mashed potatoes before. There's reference points to it. Intellectual cuisine doesn't offer those reference points many times.
So which is the more artistic of the two types of cuisines?
Well, I think they're both, I think, you know, at a very high level, I think they're both can be considered the same. They're working on the same plane, but just different, one from an emotional as opposed to an intellectual.
Well, at first I thought that was the emotional cuisine was going to be the craft cuisine, but evoking emotions, generate emotions and memories and feeling is what the best art does, what the most powerful art does. So by that definition, I would think that the chef who is most powerful in that way is the most artful chef that way. Yes?
Well, you know, again, it's
so
a matter of...
are you calling yourself an artist?
No, I think we straddle both. I think we start to straddle both lines now. I think we start to say, okay, the craft has taken us to a point where all of you start to perceive what we do as art. I've never considered myself an artist. I consider myself a craftsman. I cook every day, the same thing every day, the same techniques over and over and over again. I've become very good at it because I've done it over and over again. We presented it in a way that's aesthetically pleasing on porcelain, that, as I said, that's been designed, or silverware, all these different implements that we have and ways to present it. And yes, it's very, very beautiful. And so it's perceived as art. But to me, at the end of the day, it's still just food. And the food is there to nurture you.
So it's more the customer telling you that this is artful and artistic.
Right, I mean, that's the perception.
Dan, you are famously attempting to raise foie gras in a way that hadn't been done in the country. And it's been difficult. There are farmers who are good.
It's been a failure is what it's been, but.
Well, it's only a failure if it's over. Have you stopped? Have you stopped?
Yes, Dad. Have I stopped? No. This is Michael's referring to a foie gras farmer in Spain who I've spent a lot of time now with, and he produces foie gras without gavage, without force feeding, in this like really amazing system in the Dehesa where we get jamon iberico from. So he's taking sort of advantage of this plush ecology to stuff the geese naturally and the foie gras is really incredible. And in terms of an artist, as long as we're sitting here talking about that, I mean, this guy is about as artistic in terms of how he thinks about the world and the way the world is used and the way animals interrelate in the ecosystem in such an artful way that you would never call him a craftsman. Although you meet him and he's about as humble and as discreet as anyone you've ever met. Anyway, so I'm trying to mimic, I'm trying to copy what he's doing at Stone Barns, where my other restaurant is. And so far, we've like been really, I told Michael, we doubled the size. So we, in some ways it's been, I guess that's been successful, but we started with like a ping pong ball. And so we doubled that over 3 years. So we got a long way to go.
If you are, I was talking with Thomas about this, there's a farmer in Ohio that has grown really fabulous grass-fed beef. I've never had grass-fed beef that was satisfying, that was pleasing. This farmer has managed to do it. It's the first grass-fed beef that I have experienced. It was really good. Is this craftsmanship? Is there an element or a dimension of art to farming, to growing beautiful product?
Well, there's a lot of parallels between a guy, the man's name in Spain is Eduardo Souza. There are a lot of parallels between what he's doing and the steak that you ate, the grass-fed steak. I mean, they're both taking the abundance of their environment and producing unbelievably delicious food. So, is that an artistic endeavor? I tend to think it is, because the best farmers, the ones that at least I most admire, are the ones that don't impose their ideas on their own ecologies or on what they're producing, but they're working with those natural systems. And so in the case of your grass-fed steak, which you said you were surprised was better than a grain-fed steak, part of my answer to you would be maybe you shouldn't be so surprised, because a cow is meant to just eat grass and not grain. They're an herbivore. And done well, done with respect, and done in the right system, I think it far exceeds anything that you could taste with a corn-stuffed cattle. So is that artistry, or is that a real sense of humbleness about what nature offers? And those are hard lines. Just in the kitchen, it's a hard line to find. It's a hard line in the field.
What about the care and the maintenance of a great vineyard, like Romanée Conti, and the product that comes from that? Is that an artistic endeavor?
I think it's just somebody who cares.
Yeah.
I mean, he talks about
attention to detail.
He talks about a farmer, and we all work with farmers. I think these farmers are very caring, and determined, and have a strong desire to work with their animals. I don't think it's art. I think it's just a great sense of care about what they're doing. And I think chefs are the same way. They just really care about it.
Except I bet we could both name some farmers who care a lot and don't produce the greatest food, So I agree with you. You don't need to be an artist to be a great farmer, just like you don't need to be an artist to be a great chef. But there is some kind of artfulness. Yes, part of it is about caring about what you're producing. But
I think competence is an issue.
Competence is a big one.
There's a great piece of writing by Joseph Conrad, the preface to the Nigger of the Narcissus, in which his definition of art is that art ultimately is to make us see. It helps to shape our view of the world. Thomas helped me see food more clearly. I had a dinner at Manresa where we started off with what seemed like dessert, and made me think about made me reevaluate sweet, savory, the whole dynamics of a meal. Dan, your constant intellectual forays within the world of cooking have changed the way I see. I think that is one useful way of determining artfulness. You, David, talked about music.
Yeah, I think food is ephemeral. The memory with great food and a great experience, one which elicits a certain reaction, a thoughtful reaction from a client. Memory is very important because the food is in front of someone and then it's gone. And then the mind starts to do its thing. Does it get better? Does it get worse in context and in relation with other dishes? Do flavors change in the memory? And for me, it's kind of like music. You Perhaps there's a show or a concert you want to go, well, someone wants to go to. There's the anticipation. And then you go and then you experience it. And then after that, it's a memory. It's ephemeral like that. You know, it's not something that's hanging on a wall and you can revisit it. Of course, you can go to recordings. It's like visiting photographs, you know, of the food perhaps from your meal. But deep down, it's the memory that plays the single most important thing. And I think that's part of the key is the chef, a lot of it has to do with the client, the customer, and how they perceive your food. I mean, if it's perceived as good value and good food, and you know what, you had a meal and tomorrow's another day, but if it provokes thought and whatever the style of cuisine is, whether you know it is an intellectual or emotional cuisine, if it promotes thought and makes you look at things differently, and perhaps view things differently, and perhaps maybe you learned a little something, or maybe you learned you liked an ingredient before that you never liked before. I think those are artistic traits, but I think it's more about the relationship between the diner and the chef than just the chef itself.
So do you as a chef consider this as part of your work, your manipulation?
Absolutely. I think all ambitious cooks would like to do that, you know, is to elicit a response. You know, we're in it. I mean, I'm still in it because I like making people happy. I still get gratification at the end of a long day about having a good night's of service. You know, this is a terrible business to be in if you don't like it, or you're not into making people happy. It's you work long hours. You know, the effects of the industry on people are well documented. You know, you got to love it to be in it. And I think really the one true fundamental basis, the tenet, is that we're here to make people content, nurture, and make them happy.
And we're at a time now where you're able to do that in ways that you never were before. Before, the diner was less educated. Now you've got a really great customer. Bourdain makes a good point that when he was a young cook, they all hated the customer. The customer was kind of the enemy. Now he's saying the customer's our friend.
No, I don't think we hated the customer. I think we hated the captains.
Captains?
Yeah. The customer's always been the byproduct of that. So, yeah.
I want to ask each of you, there's a lot of young cooks here. You guys are mentors and teachers. Should a cook, should a young chef aspire to be an artist?
Are you asking me?
Why don't you start?
Well, I don't think, I would say no, not at all. Please stay away from that. I think you want to learn your craft. I think you want to learn how to nurture people. I think if your eye is on being an artist, you're going to lose the true meaning of being a cook. And being a cook is about nurturing. So be a craftsman first. You can be a little bit of an artist later.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with Thomas Keller on that one. No, well, I mean, not at all. No, I know it's okay. Like, you know, your question makes me think of when I was in Spain visiting this guy, Eduardo the Foie Gras man. I flew into Madrid and I went to the Prado Museum. And then one of the major works of the Prados is Velasquez, very famous painting called Los Meninas. And it's probably the iconic Spanish painting of, you know, the last several thousand years. And what was amazing, the painting was beautiful. I'm not an art historian or anything, but it was beautiful. I learned a little, I had a little recorder, I learned a little about the history. But you go into like a couple rooms later, and there's a room devoted to Picasso's like earliest works when he was a student. And basically he spent a year and a half painting this Velasquez. He would sit in the room and repaint, not in his interpretation, but literally copy Velasquez. This one painting, they say in the literature that he spent every single day at the museum, morning till night. And over the course of a year and a half, felt that he had perfected this iconic painting. And it wasn't until you go in the next room, and now fast forward 20 years, 30 years into his career, and he's into this Cubanism kind of thing, this deconstruction, if that's a connection to food, his deconstruction period. And he's taken little parts of this iconic painting, this Velasquez painting, and he's reinterpreted it. That's 30 years later. So suppose the story is that he went through his notebook of his earliest days, had such a connection to this craftsman-like approach to art that he spent the later years feeling confident or comfortable or daring enough to put his own interpretation on it. I think that's a good analogy to a cook becoming a chef.
Would you agree with them that you should not aspire to be an artist if you're a cook?
Absolutely.
You would agree with that?
I think the fundamental tenet, the building block is learning how to create delicious food and making people happy, doing the best possible you can to please your customers.
So how have we gotten to this point where we're talking about art and chefs being artists and whether or not they're artists? You know, how did we get here?
I think you asked the question, no?
What?
You asked the question, no?
I was asked to address the question. And Dan rightly said, I'd like to talk about the versus part. You know, why is it versus? And it sounds like we're finding that craft can be elevated to the level of art by some practitioners. Do you agree with that?
We agree that, woodworkers, chair
Competence,
could become art.
passion.
Yeah, I mean, then yes, a craftsman's work can be perceived as art.
God is in the
But
details.
I don't think the craftsman is trying to be an artist. I think he's trying to be a true craftsman and caring for what he's doing.
And a lot of this is the media too. I mean, we live in the kind of culture where that daring and that breaking of the boundaries is something that's worth writing about. It gives good copy and it's it excites people. And but I think when you talk to chefs, chefs who approach food in the way that we're talking about, really don't look at that and look at it as exalted. I mean, I think a lot of chefs look at that kind of playful art as silly and a fad and probably won't last longer than the end of a few of these conferences. What's that?
A generation.
A
maybe?
generation. Well, if it lasts a generation, that would be too bad.
Yeah.
But when in the industry, I think it's very easy to decipher who's for real and who's not. It's harder when you get out in the media climate because it really does dumb these things down to the lowest common denominator, which is unfortunate. But that's thanks again. Who is it? You my sister or something? Who is that?
I'll be here all week.
So you think the media does a disservice by?
Well, I don't want to. I know we got to watch out here, but no, a disservice. I think they're doing their job, which is to sell papers or to get people to blogs or to get people to be excited about food. That also has a certain effect that's positive. It's not all negative, but in terms of what you're talking about, what are we aspiring to? What are we looking to work towards? A lot of that is fluff, and I think in the industry, if you really talk to chefs who are practicing the kind of food we believe in, they know that just as well as all of us do.
Mm-hmm. So it's always going to come back to the excellences in the craft. There may be young cooks out here who want to ask a question of these veterans here. We can take a couple of questions. We only have a few minutes left. We have one of the best practitioners of the media here. Perhaps you'd like to address yes, you, Jeffrey. Do you have thoughts on the art versus craft as a matter of, as someone who watches chefs and writes about food?
Jeffrey's so humble, he turned around and looked at the guy behind him. He didn't even know you were talking about it.
I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
It's a chef.
If you're producing the same thing every night, then for that period of time, you're not being an artist. Thomas always stresses how the food has to be exactly the same every time, a uniformity. And that's obviously the non-art part. It's obviously the craft part. So when is Thomas an artist? Obviously when he's creating a dish. Then I think what Dan said, and also what David said about pushing the boundaries, about doing something that hasn't been done before, that's when a cook kind of approaches the level of an artist.
Is it a useful distinction? Do we need to ask? Do we need to even talk about this?
No, I would say that after we discuss it for a while, then we should never talk about it again. Because I don't think we can get any farther, towards the truth. People have been talking about this for at least, I don't know, probably 25 years. So if we haven't gotten any closer than this, maybe we've gotten close enough.
Jeffrey, when I mentioned about the dumbing down of media, I wasn't talking about you. In fact, just for a minute to say that, of all the writers about food, you have elevated the world of cuisine, and we on this stage and a lot of us around here owe a great debt to you and your writing. So thank you for that.
Do we have any other questions? I just wanted to see what you guys thought about like Malcolm Gladwell's theory of like working 10,000 hours more as like sort of perfecting the craftsman, and then like the whole artist really becomes naturally after you've sort of really defined, you know, and learned all those basics and perfected those basics, and then the art really just evolves from that.
I think, you know, Outliers was a really a great book. It's been written about before. Malcolm wasn't certainly the first person to bring that up. But, you know, certainly I resonate, that resonated with me because I look back at my career and said all the things that I did for the 10,000 hours. Certainly, I mean, the way you become good at something is by doing it over and over and over and over again. And repetition was something that I really embraced as a young cook, and I love that. And that's why I think one of the reasons I became a really good cook is because I do it over and over again. People look at a chef that slices an onion, right? Really, really fast, really, really thin. They go, wow, I wish I could do that. I said, you can. Just, you know, do it 10,000 times and you'll do it, you know? It's not hard.
The importance of innovation?
I'm sorry?
The importance of innovation?
Well, cuisine is not, it's not static, it's dynamic. It's always moving forward.
Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Craft, all of a sudden. Where does innovation fit into this? Where's art versus craft? Where is innovation?
Well, cuisine is...
I mean, you can be a craftsman and innovate. I mean, do you have to, as the only artist, innovate? I don't think so.
So craftsmen can innovate, and that's not art?
Again, I mean, you have to go back to true craftsmen and say, you know, the Japanese sword maker who makes a beautiful sword or a beautiful knife. I mean, it's really great to look at, but it's used for doing something else. It's a tool. You have you know, the woodworker who makes a beautiful chair. I mean, it's great to look at, but you know, it's meant to sit in. I mean, that's to me, as a craftsman, we're chefs. We make wonderful, great, beautiful food. It's meant to be eaten. I mean, we innovate all the time. I mean, the innovations are out there. When I started cooking, we didn't have food processors. I mean, that was an amazing innovation to have a food processor. I can't imagine what the people thought when they had electrical refrigeration. I mean, that was an amazing innovation. Or gas pumped into their restaurants as opposed to coal. That was an amazing innovation. All these innovations have helped, and technology have helped us become better cooks, better craftsmen. Yeah.
It's always moving forward. It doesn't stand still. Just like anything that involves the vagaries of ingredients and different environments and different personalities and different people, it's always moving forward. I think there's ebbs and flows in terms of trends, what becomes popular and perhaps trendy in the media, and then back off, and then perhaps really useful information in new innovations become part of the repertoire.
Well,
and the base and the foundation that builds upon.
You talk about, is it truly creation? Are we really creating things? I doubt it. I think the most important thing for me is inspiration. You know, we see things that inspire us, and then we interpret that to what's meaningful for us. I mean, Dan talks about Picasso going every day and painting the Velasquez, you know, until one day he got it down, and then he who knows if something he saw on the Velasquez inspired him to do Cubism.
Dan, do you agree that innovation is an art?
I think we're like vanilla ice cream here. We're all on the same mind. So I don't know that I have anything,
But
any
Ferran has
perspective.
created things that you haven't seen before.
Sorry?
Ferran has created things you haven't seen
Yeah,
before.
you know, the funny thing,
Well, I don't know. What? What?
I don't know, I haven't eaten there.
I don't know. I mean, foam. I mean, I love Ferran. He's a genius. You know, he's a good friend. But did he create foam? I mean, I've been drinking cappuccinos for decades. I mean, there's foam on top of cappuccinos. He saw foam, or he saw a canister or whatever. I'm not sure what inspired Ferran to do foam, but he looked at it from a different point of view. Yeah, and is that a genius? Yeah, that's a genius. Looking at something that we all see every day, but seeing something different in that. He was inspired by something to interpret it into foam. I mean, is it innovation? Certainly it's innovation. But remember, every generation has nouvelle cuisine, no? I mean, Escoffier talked about nouvelle cuisine at the turn of the last century. Every generation has new art, new music, new fashion, new food. I mean, it wasn't until recently that food became on the same level as fashion, music, art, right? I mean, up until my generation, nobody really cared about chefs and food. So now we start to talk about innovations, art, nouvelle cuisine, all these different things, but it's been happening for generations.
And the larger point is, how did he come to whatever, if you consider it innovative or not, or inventive or not, how did he come to all that? And it was through a lot of work, which is the unwritten story of his story. You know, it's like, I remember as a line cook at Boulay, he came in one night, it's like he came in the kitchen, I was like, who the hell is Ferran? What is his name? Andrea, whatever. And he's picking, he took out this sheet that was this long. And it was every meal that he had eaten in Spain and around the world for the last like 3 or 4 years. And he had a flow chart, and he was filling it out during the meal, at the end of the meal, and he would break down all of the ingredients on the plate, all the flavor combinations. He had a rating scale, he had a plating scale, went all the way across, and he was dissecting every single meal. This was years of work that he spread out on that table, and that was his way of repainting and painting again this Velasquez that Picasso did. Just different mode of experience.
I think, you know, we're thankful for Ron and everything that he's done.
You wanted to say you were...
I was going to talk about the tyranny of recipes.
The tyranny of what?
Tyranny of recipes.
Recipes.
The rigidity, a lot of
Lack of
the lack
spontaneity.
of spontaneity.
Spontaneity. We talk about that. Right.
So a lot of the innovative cuisine is very rigid and...
Jeffrey was just saying about the guy at El Bulli that does the same thing over and over 1,000 times. I mean, there is no spontaneity in intellectual cuisine because it's all thought out. It's all an equation and it's all defined. So, I mean, is there real spontaneity? There may be spontaneity in the creation of it, but the chefs, the CDPs, the young cooks, have no say in that.
I do.
Okay.
Your thoughts are fabulous, as always. Thank you. These very articulate chefs, Dan Barber, Thomas Keller, David Kinch.
Big round of
Thank you.
applause. Thank you, Michael Ruhlman, as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.